Welcome to Clubhouse with a review of the Bandai High Grade 172 MAILeS Jogan from AMAIM Warrior at the Border. This is the third MAILeS kit from the line, which I imagine is starting to feel like a lot for some fans, but this kit does manage to set itself apart in some good ways. And for some small things, I won't be repeating them if I've already covered them in my previous reviews of the Byakuchi and also the Kenbu, so make sure to watch those if you haven't already, and links are in the description. Getting right down to business, the MAILeS Jogan was released on November 13, 2021 for a price of 2,640 yen. The box art is illustrated by Yuta Otani of Planeta, so it really does seem that the Planeta artist will be handling all of the box arts for the entire series. The box measures 30 by 19 by 7.5 centimeters, and it's the same as the Kenbu and the Boomerang. The short side of the box puts this kit as the number 3 in the series, and everything else is repeated from the front of the box. And the other side is exactly the same. The long side of the box has studio shots of the kit to make sure you notice that the Jogan is very well endowed with that big gun. The other side has Gashin and K and a plug for the show, and then it's all legal text as you'd expect. Inside the box, we have the Jogan spread across 10 runners, so they do put your money to work with a lot of parts. Once again, we have this runner here that's shared between all the MAILeS kits, which I did say in the other reviews that this is surprisingly very little reused parts overall when this is Bandai we're talking about. There is also this other runner here that's shared with the other MAILeS kits, and this time this one comes in blue. We get a sheet of foil stickers with this one here for the front of the chest. And these gold ones here are for the pistons on the side of the chest. These are for the vents on the back. And then these gold ones are for the space on the lower legs between the armor. And these are for the aiming sensors on that gigantic gun. For the instructions, we get more detail on Gashin and the AIK, who a lot of people really seem to like from what I see on the internet. The back here has the different parts of the Jogan, and there actually isn't a ton to talk about. 3 more color pages are on the inside for assembly instructions. And the black and white side is all for assembly instructions as you'd expect. The first thing we have to talk about is how deceptive the Jogan's coloring is, and I mean that in the best of ways. At first glance, we have the main grayish blue, and then we have the mango yellow, and that's a really sharp highlight color. But actually, the kit goes out of its way and it has this extra bit of blue here that runs down the middle of the lower legs, and you know what? This is the only part of the kit that has this extra color, so this is something extra they put in to give you some extra value. Now in your hands this looks really great, but to be honest, if you didn't know it was here, you might think this is just the same gray as the one they use on the frame parts, so it's a really nice extra color that probably very few people will ever notice. And for those frame parts, we surprisingly have that same problem again, where this part right here is actually a more neutral gray, and then the foot right beneath it is actually a slightly darker gray. So the Jogan here actually has a total of 5 colors if we don't count the clear eyes, but in practice it looks like 3. And this is more than a little baffling, and this kit really is made much better than it comes out to look. All that aside, let's take a moment to really admire the wonderful part separation here. The shoulders here have this yellow part, and the knees here too, and these are kind of what we expect from the line, but the shield here is worth extra praise with that yellow corner here transitioning smoothly into the blue surface, and this is all done in plastic, so there are no stickers and no janky edges in between. The inside of the shield is also fully lined with dark gray details, which you will see quite a lot in other parts of this kit, and they did a really good job of this. And like I said, it's very similar in the back skirt here with the yellow corners beautifully finishing up the shape of the armor. There are more moving parts here, but we're going to look at that later. First, we have to admire the backside here. So the Kenbu has this part covered up too, but the Jogan packs so much more detail, and if you're a painter, this is a very exciting part to detail up and add texture to. Continuing with that great part separation, we have the head, and once again, this is completely seamless and every detail is done in plastic. People are a little bit divided about how they feel about these 2 little yellow slits on the front. Some people say it looks like tusks, and some people say it looks like buck teeth, but these parts themselves are no trivial thing to do in plastic. And we do get the clear blue eyes behind it, no stickers or anything else needed, but they don't stand out quite as much against the dominant blue color. The forward sweeping horns on the back might not be everyone's cup of tea either, but the color separation I'm sure we can all admire. From the back, we can see the inner layer of the head that's done in gray, and from this, you can make out how the blue armor is layered on top of that inner head. As with the other MAILeS kits, the head gets a lot of attention from the designers, and even if you might not be a fan of how the Jogan looks, the way it's put together is just really hard to hate. Here's the torso against the Kenbu and the Byakuchi, and it's still amazing how each one of these is an entirely new design. Side by side, we can much better admire how this new torso has that beautiful yellow trim that runs around each side. For builders, all the upper torso, lower torso, and all the limbs are interchangeable, so you're actually free to mix and match to make any custom build you like. Then let's talk about the feet and how wonderful they are. The entire foot moves on 1, 2, 3 axes, which is already good. The ankle armor sways separately from the foot, almost floating on top of it like this. And then, the toes at the front move together like this, which is actually better to handle and pose. We get one last surprise on the back here where the heel has this extra anchor that swings down to really help stabilize the Jogan when it needs to aim. And if this all wasn't enough to impress you, the Jogan does what the Kenbu couldn't, and the awkward circle shape of the ankle joint is neatly tucked inside the armor, whereas the Kenbu, they really didn't know what they wanted to do with all the shapes here. In case you didn't notice, I really like these feet. Now for the entire leg itself, it's a bit of an odd duck. Fully extended like this, it looks just like the Kenbu and the Byakuchi here, but actually the knee joint is moved down for the Jogan, so the middle segment stays with the thighs instead, which makes it more similar to how the Byakuchi's legs move, only that the Jogan also has an important ankle swing. One benefit of that different knee is that the Jogan is much more suited to kneeling like this, where the legs just lend themselves really well to being folded up. The Kenbu can't manage it as you can see here, but it does struggle a little bit and it doesn't manage to bring itself quite as low as the Jogan. The Byakuchi is the most inflexible of the three, and the left leg here has to angle forward like this, and it also needs the feet to pitch in to let it kneel at all. Now I'm sure you've been waiting for this because one big reason you might want the Jogan is for this gigantic 120mm double barrel twin sniper cannon. And there is a reason why I didn't talk about this first, because frankly, there actually isn't a whole lot to talk about beyond how it looks. I mean, it certainly is crazy and aggressive as heck, with that cross shape right here looking a whole lot like Nicholas D. Wolfwood's gun, The Punisher, from Trigun if you've ever watched it. I do think it looks just a little bit on the goofy side with the two barrels and separate magazines, so basically this thing is really more like two guns that's taped together back to back, and I'm not entirely sure what the merit of that is. Now I know in the animation, it's used to fire different rounds with the two different barrels, but that's really overkill. And I say this because the other weapons in the series so far have been really well grounded in reality, and they aren't as over the top as this gun. But it is what it is, and what it is, it's two sniper rifles piggybacked together. To pick on it some more, there is this handle here that looks like a bolt lever which it takes from real world rifles, but for something as chubby as this gun, I'm not so sure how the Jogan is supposed to reach around to pull that lever. You can see how it can turn to the top or the bottom barrel, but that's not really how the bolt on a rifle should work. Anyway, the gun does have one moving part down here where the stock can slide forward and back, maybe to help the gun move around better when it's not being used in long range. It's not a super big thing, but it is good to have something that's movable here. The top and the bottom magazines are fixed, so you can't pull them off unfortunately. And as you'd expect, the gun fits into the forearm like a glove, wrapping right around that front wrist section. From the box and the pictures, you might not realize that the shield is not actually a fixed part of the Jogan. You can take off this yellow piece and then attach it onto the left shoulder, and the shield has an offset arm here that ends with a ball joint on the shield itself, so you can have the shield pointed basically in any direction you like, and that makes the shield really useful. There is the same hard point on the opposite shoulder if you take off that same yellow piece on that side. We've already seen a different set of shields in the animation that goes onto both shoulders along with some new handguns, and those parts will be included with the V33 Stork carrier that's coming in January, which is something to look forward to if you really like the Jogan. And one more thing, because they reuse some parts of the runners, you do get a spare of that offset arm, which is quite useful if you're doing custom builds. On the inside of the shield here, we have this stowed away. It's the combat dagger for short range fights. They call this a dagger, but it's clearly meant to be something like a commando knife. This is a one-piece mold, and what you see here is what you get. In the arm, it might shock you how small this weapon actually is. It really does look way too small, and even in desperate situations, I'm not so sure what this is going to do to help other than piss off the enemy even more. I mean, well, I make fun of it, but I do think it makes a lot of sense for the Jogan to have some way to defend itself if the enemy really does get too close, so I do appreciate this combat dagger being here. Going back to the back skirt once again, you remember these yellow corners? those are actually support feet that can extend outwards, but you do have to swap them out with this fully extended version, and the feet themselves don't actually extend. It's really nice of them to include 2 sets of these yellow feet parts so you don't have to swap these out. The feet do swivel around on a peg like this, and they do stop themselves in this position. Now, a small gripe here is the hollowed out struts here, which look okay at first sight, but if you think about it, structurally, at least the upper, thicker part of the strut should be filled in to make it an enclosed space to house that lower leg. The default look right here doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, you place it in and it looks all good until you realize how short this is even when it's extended like this. The skirt itself does have an additional swivel right here, but they really only make the legs even further off the ground. So the Jogan has to kneel down to make full use of those back legs, which is probably the best position to be stabilized like this. It is good to have this extra detail here because it does show us that the Jogan is indeed built for long-range combat with that gigantic gun. The hands we get are the same as the other MAILeS kits, and you can see all of the problems in the Backcheese's review. It's a flawed design that has been passed on to all the MAILeS units unfortunately, and this kit unfortunately is no different. Oh, and the chest here can flip up like this. Now the instructions say they can go further up and let you tuck the whole head in, but on my kit it just doesn't go up that much. I've studied it and I couldn't figure out what's wrong. But also, the instructions don't tell you at all what this is for, so I have no idea what this is supposed to be. Let me know in the comments below what you think it might be. It's kinda janky, so maybe it's some kind of abandoned function or something. Onto the articulation. The head looks up this much, and looks downwards this much. The head can turn all the way around on top of that really long neck. The shoulders swing all the way forward to here as all MAILeS kits can. They swing outwards this much. The arms swing all the way around with nothing getting in the way. The biceps rotate around a full circle. The elbow can turn freely in either direction until it hits something. The wrist can also turn freely on a peg like this. The hand can be adjusted on their ball joint, and they can rotate around a full circle. The upper torso dips forward a lot, and it still doesn't swing backwards at all. The slanted peg lets it sway side to side, and the entire upper torso can turn around a full circle like this. The legs kick outwards not quite 90 degrees because of the really big thighs. Those chunky thighs can rotate a little bit around like this. The kick forward is as impressive as always, and backwards it's also very impressive. The knee rotates on a peg, which we've seen earlier in this review already, and the feet we've already covered in full, so I'm not going to repeat it here. The Jogan moves like all MAILeS kits do, and thanks to the really flexible feet, you're really gonna have no trouble planting it onto the ground even with some very extreme poses. The series never had trouble with the articulation overall, and the Jogan continues that wonderful tradition. Being flexible but never troublesome to handle, it's good stuff as always. Here it is one more time next to the Kenbu, and then here's the Backchee. With their legs fully extended, they are exactly the same height even though the legs are quite different between the three. And here it is next to Hobby, who decided to barge in during my shooting. Here it is next to the Arbor Special Carrier because I was shooting its review alongside the Jogan, and yes, the Jogan fits right in the trailer, even though there is a small quirk to it which I talk about in the Truck's Zone review. And here's the lower end benchmark, the entry grade RX-78. And here's the upper end benchmark, the high grade New Gundam. As always, these aren't the same scale, but this is simply to give you an idea of how the Jogan will look on a shelf with your other 1144 kits. It's big as the entire series is, and it's gonna look a little bit out of place. With all that said, here's the Hobby Clubhouse 3-point verdict on the Bandai high grade 172 MAILeS Jogan. Number 1, it's a wonderful kit that looks nothing like a wonderful kit. If you're like many people online, you started off not liking the Jogan perhaps. I know I certainly wasn't exactly thrilled about this kit from just what I saw in the photos, but this kit turned out to be so much more than what it seems, like the extra blue color on the legs, and the two-tone gray that no one can see, and the beautiful inner details on that back skirt. I mean, all the best parts of this kit that I came to really like are all things that Bandai really didn't bother to show off, and in the end, you will be really happy to have this kit because it brings you so much more than what Bandai tells you about it. And that really is a big praise for the kit. It's not such a big praise for Bandai's PR department actually. And number 2, it's still an original mold. I still need to bring up just how crazy and stupid it is for Bandai to make entirely new molds for each and every MAILeS unit. They really don't share any parts when it comes to their outer armor, and I think it says a lot about how great each of these designs are when we'd be okay if they just reuse any one of these 3 designs and just recolor them with a different head. The Jogan gives us a third take of the MAILeS design, and it's something from an alternate dimension, and if you've been enjoying these designs so far, this kit brings you basically an entirely new design with the same basic structural elements. You won't ever think much of it if it stands on its own, but if you have all 3 of these like the crazy person I am, you really will enjoy this exorbitant amount of design work they put into each of the MAILeS units. It's wasteful and it's crazy, and really I love it. And number 3, it strays from realistic designs a little bit. It has to be acknowledged that one of the most unique parts of Warrior at the Border kits are how much they are grounded in real-world machinery and vehicles. They feel like mechanical equipment, and their weapons are mostly sensible for their combat roles. And the Jogan's biggest sin is how sci-fi anime it is with a slightly absurd double-barrel gun. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense even if we're being generous. The biggest shame here is it really just is the gun that doesn't play nice with the rules and it just goes off and does its own thing. But the reality is that this gun is just an important part of the kit, and I suspect this might make or break this kit for a lot of people. And in case you're in the break camp and you really don't want the gun, do remember that we are getting new shields and pistols with the upcoming store carrier. So that's a review for the MAILeS Jogan, a strange but wonderful member of the MAILeS family where all its best parts are things you can't see from the photos and Bandai won't tell you about. Thank you so much for watching. Come look us up on social media with updates on upcoming videos and sneak peeks at future projects, links are in the description below. Or hang out here some more with one of these other videos. But before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified of new videos from Hobby Clubhouse, and I'll see you next time.